I'm Patrick Sears, Managing Director of the Westport program, which is the state's planning program to transition container trade from the Fremantle Inner Harbour down to Kwinana over time. We have identified the final option for how containers will move across the full supply chain, including a final concept design for the port and a final concept design for the road network, the rail network and the intermodal logistics networks behind it. So Westport is going to be one of the biggest infrastructure programs in Western Australia, and it is so fundamental to our society. We have one container terminal for the whole of the western side of the continent. It is essential that it operates well, and it is essential that it operates well for the full future of Western Australia. Westport is established around a set of strategic goals that we want to achieve to ensure that this project delivers long-standing impact and benefit for Western Australia. This goes beyond just making sure that it is cheaper for trade. It goes beyond making sure that we have a commercially viable port. It's about making sure that we have a sustainable and regenerative supply chain that enhances Cockburn Sound. It's about making sure that the port and the supply chain benefits the community that lives around it, not just the people buying goods at the end of it. It's about acknowledging that we need to make a safe supply chain, and it's about ensuring that the project enhances and builds the Western Trade Coast as one of our key economic locations in Western Australia. We have had one of the most informed and one of the most comprehensive multi-criteria analysis processes and decision-making frameworks for infrastructure in Western Australia's history. It's something I'm incredibly proud of, that when we come up with this final design, we can stand behind it and say this is as informed as it can possibly be at this stage, and that this is the right network for Western Australia for the next century. All of these models and all of these simulations and analysis allowed us to look at the full operation of the supply chain and identify across everywhere, where is the bottlenecks, where are the barriers to efficient trade, where are the barriers to the network being able to scale with Western Australia's economy and grow as is required to. And that's been central to us being able to make decisions about where we need to make investments in infrastructure, where we need to make policy changes to make the whole system work well. We looked at 30 possible ways of having a port that would work in this location. We were able to narrow that with consideration of those 5 key Westport goals and outcomes for society down to 7 long list options. That multi-criteria analysis looking at the long list allowed us to reduce it to a short list of 3 potential options which we were very confident was going to provide a good performance for Western Australia. That multi-criteria analysis showed us that option G was the best terminal option for Western Australia. Because the whole project has been moved a little bit to the south, the breakwater has also moved south, away from the remnant seagrass beds and away from the cobble reefs which provide habitat but are also incredibly popular recreational fishing and diving zones in Cockburn Sound. It also allowed us to move the port off the Water Corporation desalination infrastructure and off the Synergy and New Gen power infrastructure. Moving the port further to south actually had a lesser impact in terms of the flushing of the Sound. In some respects it improved the flushing of the Sound, and it had a lower impact on the circulation of water in the Sound, which snapper aggregation and spawning relies on, along with other species. The Kwinana bulk terminal is a crucial import facility for cement and other building products that we require in our metropolitan area. It is ageing infrastructure, and now we'll collaborate with Fremantle Ports to make that part of the new terminal. On the road network, we've understood from stage 2 that Ankertel Road across to Tonkin Highway was always the plan, and that remains the plan for Westport. We'll develop Ankertel West from the coast all the way through to the Kwinana Freeway, and we need to do that early for construction so we don't interfere with the operations of the Kwinana Western Trade Coast. This allows us to spend a little bit more time doing the design for Ankertel East, so we have a staging option where trucks can move along Ankertel, up Kwinana and Row, and we'll protect the land and slowly develop Ankertel East to provide that ring road around Perth for heavy freight. We've been able to reduce the number of intermodal terminals while still maintaining efficiency of the supply chain to locations in Forestfield, which exists, Kenwick, which is coming on next year but should be expanded in the future, and a future Kewdale intermodal terminal which will be developed early but then in the middle of the century could be expanded into a super intermodal terminal. The work we've completed in stage 3 extends from updated trade forecasts to how many containers and how many ships will be arriving in Western Australia over the next 50 to 60, 70 years. It's identified the ships that are being built around the world and how big those ships are going to be that come to Western Australia that our future port will need to service. We've undertaken detailed simulations of how ships will travel in storm conditions and in calm into Cockburn Sound and into the port to understand what the size of channels and what the size of the port will require to be. We've undertaken extensive studies of waves and wind action on container ships to understand how they will be able to unload their containers during different conditions. That's been very important for this project because it's identified the need for a breakwater to allow ships to be able to unload over 90% of the time, which is what we need for Western Australia's only container terminal. The freight rail modelling has really helped us identify that with proper terminal design, interfacing with proper terminal rail heads, interfacing with a well-designed rail freight network, is that we can really grow the amount of containers which are on rail rather than in trucks on our roads. The option G provides the opportunity for 2 different rail heads for each stevedore to have their own rail connection rather than option A, which would only provide one. And what we've also been able to do is to look at the growth of Perth over the next 50 years to identify where a good's going to have to get to. Because if we can make that efficient, it reduces the cost of transport, emissions of transport, and reduces the cost to end users. We're very well aware that the state government does not drive trucks, it does not run rail networks, it does not operate intermodal terminals, and it does not unload ships or drive the ships. It is crucial when the government is taking control of designing something like this supply chain that is heavily informed by the operators of that supply chain. This has been really instrumental in us actually making sure the design is going to be fit for purpose for those operators. But not only has it been the operators, it's also been the environmental NGOs, fishing groups, local governments and community groups. And of course for us it's also been the Noongar Advisory Group which has been advising us through this whole project about how we need to consider Aboriginal culture, spiritual values and their future aspirations for jobs as well as protection of their cultural assets. All of these stakeholders helped us shape how we run the multi-criteria analysis. We also have the opportunity to work with operators and work in our context to look at those innovations that are happening around the world and start to trial them here so that when we get to that final step of design, we're building in the latest technology that's going to deliver the best outcomes for Western Australia. The design of the supply chain is really crucial. But something I'm really proud of in Westport is that we've also been able to bring forward extensive studies around the environment, and even though it is our outer harbour and has been for 50 years and our heavy industrial area, it is crucial that we take care of it within the Westport program. We've been able to invest $13.5 million into the West Australian Marine Science Institute to sponsor one of the biggest marine science programs in Australia right now. We've done it with the Marine Science Institution because we know that they will publish everything and make that freely available, and that is a commitment to the state that we're going to do this transparently and openly so people can understand the implications of what we're doing in this project. A full program including the physics of how sand moves around Cockburn Sound and how water flows around Cockburn Sound, building those into environmental models so we can tell if we have different terminal designs, different breakwater designs and different channel designs, what is that going to do to affect Cockburn Sound's operation? We want to understand ways that we can build the resilience of Cockburn Sound before we start and then increase environmental habitat, seagrass meadows after we finish so that ultimately we end up with a net nature positive port and a regenerative port and supply chain. We've been very aware of the fact that Cockburn Sound is a hugely important recreational and community asset. We've undertaken a huge amount of work with recreational fishers, with local governments and with community members to map all of those locations which are important to people. We've done a huge amount of studies to understand that it will not affect other areas where there's a lot of recreational use. In terms of where people can boat and where people can fish and drive their small craft, it is literally going to be the area between the breakwater and the quay line, which is probably off limits to people's boats. The rest of Cockburn Sound will continue to operate as it is right now. People will still be able to recreate and utilise the Cockburn Sound as they have previously, and our commitments to try and make this a nature positive port and a regenerative port mean hopefully there'll be more assets that they can enjoy in the future. Westport has invested with the West Australian Planning Commission in the Future for Fremantle study to work with the community to understand what could happen in that location. That work will continue over the next 10 to 20 years while the Westport project continues to come up with a final plan for what will be developed when Westport moves, the container terminal. It's a fantastic milestone to have the final design for the full supply chain. We have further work to do on design to reduce the cost, reduce environmental impact and improve performance. That further work will find its way into a business case which will be submitted to the state and Commonwealth governments in the middle of 2024. Environmentally, we'll be referring the project to the EPA in early 2024. This will allow the EPA to look at the project and consult with the community about what they would like to see in a final submission. If the government decides to proceed with the project when they make their decision in mid to late 2024, we plan on submitting it to the EPA in early 2025 when the community and all stakeholders will be able to provide their independent commentary through the EPA. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of Westport for spending that time with us. It has shaped the project and contributed to us having the best supply chain design and the most sustainable supply chain design for Western Australia. Hopefully this message and this information has given you a bit of an update on where we're at this stage of the project, but the journey is not over and we look forward to engaging with you further as we undertake further design.